but we're ready to show you how to create graphics for apparel with a laser cutter. And just to kick things off, we want to launch a poll to understand who in the audience actually owns a laser cutter already. That way we can speak to you as if you own a laser cutter, give you some tips and tricks, and if you don't, we can perhaps share some recommendations of options for laser cutter throughout the session. So we'll go ahead and launch that poll. Karen is with me today helping, and so just take a moment to complete that.
71% voted yes, 29% voted no.
Okay, 71% yes, 29% no. Okay, good. So for those of you with cutters, if you're not currently decorating apparel with your cutter, we're going to show you some ways to do that. So I'd like to start with the basics of the process and the actual product that's going to go into the bed of your laser cutter or a laser cutter to create graphics. And the material is a heat transfer film. So at Stahls, for those of you with knife cutters, you know we sell heat transfer film by the roll. And this particular material can be cut on a vinyl cutter in a mirror image or a laser cutter in a mirror image and basically weeded away to expose your graphic and prepare it for application onto a heat press. So at Stahls, we manufacture a wide variety of heat transfer films, everything from products for t-shirts to team uniforms, to glitter finishes, metallic finishes, reflectives, you name it. There are a ton of different styles of products that you can cut and create graphics with. Now, traditionally, a knife cutter is the way that these graphics are created. So if we take a look over at our cutter, something like a Graphtec CE6000 is a typical knife style cutter. Now, knife style cutters do exactly just that. They cut with a knife or a blade. And basically that blade is dragging through the material to create the cut. It's cutting through the top layer of film on the roll of heat transfer film, but not through the carrier. And a laser cutter, the concept is similar. For all intensive purposes, we want to execute the same thing. We want to program a power and a speed on that laser that allows us just to cut through the top layer of the film and not through the carrier. Because ultimately, after your design's been cut and weeded, you end up with a heat transfer that's held together by the carrier, everything in perfect registration for application at the heat press, and we'll show you that momentarily. Now, a knife cutter is good for several reasons. Number one is they're typically rolled style, so I can load a roll of material and it can feed continuously and cut a lot of graphics. Having said that, as we start to expand into new styles of heat transfer film, such as very thick materials or very thin and stretchy materials, sometimes a knife cutter falls short on accuracy in cutting. And also, of course, the blade dulls over time and you have to change the blade. So throughout this process, the most complicated part is weeding the excess material. So if that cutter doesn't complete an accurate cut, you're going to have a lot of challenges in weeding and preparing the design for application. So a laser cutter is not only going to address some of those issues, but it's also going to give us the ability to cut finer detailed graphics and to really process graphics that require less labor in the weeding step. And we're going to share all that with you today, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to come over to the Fusion heat press, and we're going to apply a basic heat applied graphic from heat transfer film to make sure everybody understands the process and how this works. So we're working on our Hotronics Fusion heat press. This particular press is a swing away style, and we have a t-shirt prepped here that we're going to load onto the machine. It's very simple. You can either split and thread your shirt over the base of the platen, or you can just drape the collar over the edge of the platen, and then I'm going to preheat to remove the moisture and wrinkles. So I preheat that just for a few seconds to remove the moisture and wrinkles, and then I'm going to prepare the actual application. So in this case, I'm applying a left chest graphic. I'm going to position that down. You see how all the design is in perfect registration. This has been cut and weeded away and prepared. And this film has an adhesive on the back side. So when applied with the heat press with the right time, temperature, and pressure, you get something that will outlast the garment, every bit as durable as a screen printed graphic. So when you're heat transferring films, and there's a variety of films that can be cut on your laser cutter, I'll cover the choices here in a second, everyone comes with a recipe for what to program this heat press for from the standpoint of time, temperature, and pressure. And when applied at the proper time, temperature, and pressure, it goes on accurately. It's very easy to peel away from the carrier, and you get an extremely durable heat-applied graphic that's going to outlast that garment. So get yourself a quality heat press if you don't have one already. We recommend the Hotronix line of heat presses, but this is going to allow you to heat apply and create all of these graphics that you see here. And before we go too deep in the laser cutting, I'm just going to walk through some of the finishes that are available to you that are heat applied. And we'll do that through this flip book here. So the idea is I can create multicolor graphics out of heat transfer films. This is just a basic heat transfer film. You can layer materials directly on each other with heat transfer films. This particular one, I'm not sure if it's coming through in the visual there, is a reflective. So there's opportunities for high visibility apparel that you can feed through your laser cutter. This particular one is an athletic material that would be good for team uniforms. We have a glitter material, and let me do just a little zoom here so we can get a better look at the glitter. So we have the glitter material. You have that nice sparkle. That's the one we just heat applied. We have flock material on top of a metallic. So all of these materials are completely interchangeable. This is a hologram. Hologram has some interesting applications for a laser, a two-color flock, and so on. So the idea here is you can get really creative with your finishes, but also with your graphics when you're laser cutting. So let's switch over to our first video that's going to walk you through this process. And this is going to show you some of the basics with die cutting through the backing on a laser. So a particular laser that we're using is just a small format universal. This particular one has a 40-watt laser, but you can use Epilog, you can use universal, any laser cutter on the market will cut these heat transfer films. We just sheeted the material off and laid it into the bed. So you'll notice on the still frame there that we're looking at a graphic that not only did we cut the outside edge, but we also cut through the material. So this is the actual finished graphic that was cut. You can see that my finger can poke through the center cavity on the R. So that does a couple things for us. Number one is it allows for easier weeding. When you're programming the laser to cut, you have the ability to program two powers, at least two powers. I can program what's called a kiss cut, which basically is cutting just through the film and not through the carrier. And then I can program something called a die cut, which is just another cut line color in your laser cutter software. For those of you that own lasers, you're familiar with this, where I can cut clear through the material and the carrier. That's very beneficial for cutting interior cavities and having them fall away in the bed of the laser and me not having to weed those out. So it saves a ton of time in the actual processing. So what I'd like to do is if we can switch over to the PowerPoint momentarily. Before we get too far in ways to cut and ways to process, let's cover what you need to look for in a material that can be processed. Unfortunately, CAD cut material is known as heat transfer vinyl, and so it implies that all of this material actually has a base composition of polyvinyl chloride. For those of you that own lasers, you know that polyvinyl chloride is a big no-no when it comes to laser cutting because it can actually damage the lens of the laser and void your warranty on your laser machine. So when you start to search for heat transfer films that can be processed and cut safely on a laser, we recommend a polyurethane composition. And the cool thing is a lot of the heat transfer film marketplace, including the materials that Stahls manufactures, are 99% polyurethane. And so if you go over to the Stahls website, in this case we can just visit cadcutdirect.com, if you click on any particular material and then you navigate over to the tab called Tech Specs, basically on the tech specs you will see the composition of the actual film itself. In this case we see thermofilm is also a polyurethane composition. So if it's polyurethane, not only is it safe for laser cutting, but we've made this stuff polyurethane so it is safe to decorate children's apparel as well. If it comes in contact with the mouth or they chew on it, there's not lead and phthalates in the material. Basically, it's safe for kids. In the U.S. market for apparel decorators, you may recognize that as something that's CPSIA certified, which means that's the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. And basically, the government legislates that if you're decorating a garment, whether it's screen printing or any product that can come in contact with the children's mouth has to be CPSA compliant, which means it has a minimal amount, if any, lead, phthalates, or things that are proven in scientific studies to be damaging to the child. So rest assured you can find just about every single material on the Stahls site, I believe outside of this neon product that's a polyurethane composition, and you can begin immediately feeding that through your laser cutter. So look for polyurethane. Next, let's review again the types of cutting. So we watched the quick video, and this is a sample of something that could be processed like the design that was processed in the video, where we've cut through the film layer and we start to weed the outside edge. But if you look closely, you'll notice that the center openings of the B, and then it's probably more recognizable on the S and the E, you see how that's die cut all the way through. Basically, in our art preparation, we've programmed a different power, and that prevents me from having to take my little weeding tool and picking out all of those center pieces, saving me a ton of time as I start to look at player names and rosters and different designs. All the labor now is in art setup, and I can efficiently create graphics that reduce the weeding time. Something else I want to point out as you're starting to program art for your laser and create bounding boxes around your design, you notice we've cut a little alignment notch that's centered on the particular text. We can cut that straight out of the carrier, which makes it very easy to line up on the garment, especially if I have a laser alignment tool that's compatible with the heat press. So that is the most standard type of cutting, kiss cutting and die cutting. And I want to show you another video here that shows that process and how you can leverage that process for a more detailed font. So this particular video shows that same universal laser cutter, but it's cutting through silver glitter flake material. Glitter is one of the most popular heat transfer films on the market. It is a polyurethane based material. It's completely safe to cut on your laser, and we've used a font called, I believe this one is called Curls, or it's not Curls, but it's one of those sort of cartoon fonts that have the center of the letters that are detailed and have areas that you would normally have to weed. But in this case, you can see it really clearly as we're die cutting out the centers of the T there, how the center components sort of fall away, and then we're cutting the outside edge with our little alignment notch, and then ultimately we are going to remove that from the bed and weed away the excess. Now, as we're weeding away the excess, here's some things that you want to keep in mind. You want to keep the material on your laser cutter completely flat so you can get accurate cutting. We recommend that you use a honeycomb cutting table because that will maximize the area or the airflow through the piece during laser cutting. It also minimizes the laser reflection back onto the lens. And if you can, get something that has air assist in a cone or a back sweep configuration. That way you can sort of clear out anything that may fog up the lens and cause some inaccuracy with cutting. So just some details, but you want to have something that's flat and you want to have that ready to go. So the next thing that I want to show you is this finished piece as we're close up here. So you can see this is that same tailor text that's been cut out in the design. It has the alignment notch. It's ready to flip over and heat apply onto the garment. And those pieces being cut out of the centers aren't going to cause any issues at all. So that's the basic types of laser cutting. If we can hop back over to the PowerPoint. This is where it really gets impressive. This is something called Raster Ablation. So for those of you that are doing laser cutting, you know that you can etch different surfaces like wood and metal and glass to create really cool effects. Well, you can etch heat transfer film as well in the same way. Here we've actually taken a photo of a classic car that was actually one of our photos from our owner, Ted Stahl, and we put it through the photo processing software for the universal laser and ultimately process that onto our CAD Cut Premium Plus material. This could be out of fashion film, whatever you want. And then, of course, the guy that was doing some of the testing, you may recognize, it's Mark Marola. He's one of our Stahls TV presenters on the left. He, of course, had to take a photo of himself and try the process as well. But the cool thing is now I can really do some unique photo processing and looks with my laser cutter that a lot of other decorators aren't doing. And the process, once again, is Raster Ablation. And if I jump over to the design software to talk to you a little bit about how to set up art for this process, you'll understand it a little better. So the particular software that I'm pulling up right now to show you is CADWorks Live. We give plenty of seminars on CADWorks Live here at Stahls TV, and there's plenty of recordings on stahls.tv.com. But this is a free online design software that you can sign up for and log in for free and start to create art for vinyl cutting. It creates vector art, so not only does it work with a knife cutter, but it works with a laser cutter for you as well. So I've set up this particular job in such a way that you can see 3 styles of cut lines. We see the blue cut lines, which in this case are intended to be kiss cut being just through the film, not through the carrier. We've set up the red cut lines at a power that's going to be die cut, meaning I'm cutting clear through the film. And notice how some of the sort of cutouts in the body of the Greyhound here are completely die cut out, so they fall away like we just showed you. And then lastly, I set up what's called a raster fill for the raster ablation. All the black areas are set up in such a way that they're going to etch away. So it's not necessarily used always just for the photo processing technique, although that's rather cool, but you can use it to etch away small details. So where there are very small details, or for instance, like in the head of this bear mascot, I don't want to weed all that, and if I were to try to cut all the way through that, I'd have some components like the white in the nose here that would just sort of fall out and not be held together by the integrity of the carrier and the design if I die cut all that. So you use this raster ablation or this etch away effect to get all of your details and to go through that. So just a lot of opportunity when you think about different ways that you can process with this. And before I go and show you how to do that, let me show you this laser etch piece back on camera. This is a piece that's been laser etched away. So you can kind of see how that looks once the camera gets a chance to refocus here. You can see how that looks where we have that classic car with all the pieces etched away, where I basically flip it over for heat application. So just really unique what you can do and what you can create with this cutter. So if we can swap back over to CADWorks, let's show you some setup here, but first we're going to pause for a question. Go for it.
Timothy would like to know what watt laser are you using in the videos, and if you could give a little more information on that laser.
Sure. That's a 30 watt or 40 watt laser. I'm not sure exactly. We've sort of went back and forth on which one to invest in, but you can use, we've had a lot of the testing done by Universal on a 30 and a 50 watt laser. And just for perspective, one of our more popular materials, fashion film, for a t-shirt application, in order to do kiss cutting on a 30 watt laser, we have a power of 15% and a speed of 50%. And then if you wanted to do the full die cutting, we had a power of 50% and a speed still of 50%. And for the raster ablation, we did a power of 40% and the speed of 50%. So we intend to publish all of these laser settings on the Stahls TV blog. So if you're not following the Stahls TV blog, make sure you click on the blog link on stahlstv.com and subscribe, and we'll soon publish all of these settings that you can use as a guideline to dial in your particular laser. So you have some versatility. 30 watts, plenty of power to cut any of these heat transfer films. So let's show you how to set up a piece of artwork. I'm going to delete this off the screen. In CADWorks, you can do a couple different things. I think clip art's one of the most powerful things that you can do really with doing some fine detailed stuff. So if I take this eagle head, for instance, open that up, and let's zoom a little bit to fit. Basically, the first thing I did is I set up a custom color palette in CADWorks to match my settings in universal, so I set up the true red color is the RGB value there, just true red. The same thing with the true blue for those cut line settings. And then, of course, the true black for the etching. Most laser drivers read that as RGB 000. To set up a custom color palette, basically, you can click on, if you didn't see how I did that, this top right option in CADWorks, click on that, and then you can basically click Add Palette and set up your colors. So Add Palette, you name it, and then ultimately you're creating these RGB values to create your color palette. So that's already created for me since I'm working with this. Now, when I first open up this artwork, it's reading all as one image. So one thing that I like to do ahead of time is sort of break that apart down to the smallest level, which would be curves. It'll take a second to process, and basically I'm looking at some wireframe art at that point. Now, if there are certain areas that I want it to etch away, like these small details, I can begin selecting them. I can draw a box around them as well all together, but let's just take the center of this, for instance. If I want that to etch away, I just double-click on it, and basically, instead of customizing a fill color, I'm going to customize a line color. And I'll say, I'm sorry, if I want it to die cut through, I select a line color. In that case, you know, I can have the red be my die cut color, so I can assign that. Click OK, and it will automatically customize the red, basically creating my art so it's ready to die cut. Now, CADWorks is running a little bit slow in the rendering here today because of my wireless internet connection, but typically, as long as you have a strong connection, this is fast, it creates it, and now you can see I have the die cut red. Now obviously you'd want to select and group multiple objects and assign that to all of them. If there's a small detail that you want to etch away, like this little piece, basically you're just going to assign that a fill color of the RGB value black, and ultimately once that drops onto the screen, it's going to create it in such a way that it's going to etch it away once you group all this together. So the idea here is you set up the art completely. If I want to draw a weed border around this, I can add a shape such as a box around it. And of course I want to make that box transparent, so I just click on the fill color and I drag my transparency slider all the way to the left, and let's make that a die cut as well for the fill. So there's that, and then I assign my outline to be the die cut. Click OK. That'll drop that onto my screen. And then let me zoom to fit so I can sort of size that down. But basically, all I'm doing is creating that sort of outline box that's going to die cut around my image. If I want to add alignment notches, I can add those as well, just in the form of a triangle die cut on the corners. So you create your full graphic, and then CADWorks, while vector cut won't drive your laser cutter, once you have your artwork completely set up, all I'm going to do is export that in a PDF format or whatever format that your cutter driver, your laser cutter driver will accept. It could be a PLT, a PDF, whatever you'd like, but it'll travel through, import it into your driver, and then ultimately you're ready to send over to the cutter. So once you really start utilizing this raster ablation, look at this sort of fine detail that you can get. So this was kiss cut, could be kiss cut around the outside edges of the letter. It could be etched away through raster ablation through all the center cavities. Frankly, if it's so small detailed, I could etch away the outside edge. But the idea here is you can do a lot of unique things with heat transfer film, and this is just scratching the surface of what's possible with the laser cutter. So I'm going to bring the camera angle back over to center here, and I want to take some questions, and then I want to talk a little bit about some other types of materials you can process through your laser for decorating apparel beyond just heat transfer films. We have any questions, Karen? Okay, no questions. So if you have them, feel free to type them in. I know this is new for a lot of you, but a laser is a very powerful machine, and it can really upgrade your art, allow you to get finer detail, and minimize your production time. So the next thing that I want to cover is twill. So I'm not sure how many embroiderers we have out there, but twill is very popular as an applique product for embroidery. Now, twill typically needs to be sewn onto a garment. If you have a laser cutter and you buy permatwill, which has a permanent adhesive, it does not have to be sewn. And the reason why is most people that are cutting twill cut it with a knife cutter, and what happens is when you don't sew it and you just heat apply it, the edges fray when it's laundered. If you cut twill with a laser cutter, it basically seals the edges of the twill, so it doesn't need sewn. If it has a permanent adhesive, it can just be heat applied. So it's a lower price point for that applique material on the back of a jersey for numbers, whatever it might be. Now, in addition to that, the cool thing about twill is that if you start to build in layers and you're going to sew it, the laser cutter will allow you to do something called kiss cutting. And so I want to show you a video of kiss cutting, and I think it's actually the last video in our series, Karen, the very last one. I want to show you kiss cutting on twill so you can understand this process. This basically allows you a way to take 2 layers of twill, polyester twill fabric, and process those at one time. On a knife cutter, I'd have to cut colors individually. But with a laser cutter, I can do what's called kiss cut. So you see the red layer of twill, but actually there is a white layer of twill behind there that are stacked on top of each other on the machine. Now the red material does have a pressure sensitive carrier, which means it's a sticky backing that allows it to hold to the white polyester twill through processing. And that's why you're seeing these double sets of cut lines. This will really come to life when we start to weed it. And you'll see the result here just in a second. So we're pulling all the excess away. And now you see the white start to be revealed in the actual design. And basically this is in perfect registration. So yes, if it's permatwill, I can just heat seal it, but given that the top layer is pressure sensitive, this needs to be sewn. So basically what you would do is you would create your sew file off of the machine. So this is that finished piece. You notice it's all in registration. Through the process of applique, you're going to sew a placement stitch onto your garment. And now, instead of having to line up individual letters, it's a single step placement onto the placement stitch, and I can sew out my particular job. Now, how that compares, if you were to just cut basic twill, sure, I can hold this background Huskies design together, but if I want to cut Huskies as a foreground text and it's not connected, I'm literally going to have to do all this individual layout of the letters on the machine, which is going to take a lot more time than as if I kiss cut it. So you get the time savings. It's a single step placement at the embroidery machine versus having to individually line up and place graphics. So that's some of the power of a laser as well. Now, of course, when you start to get into this, it's not only text. You can do kiss cut logos. This particular one's been kiss cut, and the way it's been digitized is there's actually direct embroidery for a car that goes in here for Jake's Auto Shop. If you're not into laser cutting twill, know that we can kiss cut it for you and basically send you the pieces and registration with the sew disc so you can sew it out. But the idea here is with a laser cutter, you can cut your own twill. Now, I would recommend you invest in an applique software such as Twill Stitch Pro to make that a little bit easier to execute. Basically, that will create the sew file on top of your twill so it's ready to sew out. Now, I want to show you one more video, and this is going to show you, okay, this is actually going to show you the process of laser etching that photo. We'll roll with this because I have a physical sample of the etched effect on twill, but it's the same concept. You can actually etch on the face of twill as well, utilizing the Raster Ablation functionality of the laser. You set up the art in a similar way. Now we're etching away the photo here of the car, and this is at real speed. This isn't sped up, so you know, other than the edit points where we're cutting it, but we're etching away the car to expose it. I'll show you how this looks on twill. that shows you something that's been etched onto a single layer of permanent twill as well. So you can see you can get almost 3D effects. There's a lot of unique things that you can do with twill etching. Permanent adhesive on the back for just heat applying it onto a garment. Once again, I can set this up in CADWorks. CADWorks has tools. If we flip back over to my computer, CADWorks has tools that will allow you not only to just do basic text, but when I start to add text to my screen, and let's do STV, I can select a font, and I can add an effect, such as a 3D effect, to start to create the framework for etching away to get that effect. So if I open that 3D effect up, it applies it to my text, and then once I've created that, I can go back in and take these sort of highlights that you see in the gray and colorize them away in a way that it becomes my raster ablation to create some really unique, cool effects. So there is a ton of opportunity for not only what you can do with heat transfer films, but what you can do with twill as well. So I'm going to go to the previous slide here. Okay, this is the one. So I think there's a question, and then I want to show you the processing of this, the concept of this actual design as well, because I forgot that part.
There's a few questions. The first is, can you cut flock with the laser?
Yes, you can cut flock with the laser as long as it's a polyurethane-based product. The flock that we sell, CAD cut flock, is a polyester-based fiber, and it also has a polyurethane adhesive.
Can you purchase the lasers through Stahls?
Unfortunately, Stahls does not sell a laser at this time, just because we're not, I think, positioned from an install and support standpoint. There's a big requirement there, but we recommend the universal lasers. That's the one I've had experience with, and if you're interested in a laser, I can definitely get your info over to Universal, and they can connect you with a local dealer that can install on site, train you on how to use it, and support you very well on the lasers. All right, that's it for questions. Okay, so Karen, I put you out of sequence here on the videos, but what I'd like to show is the next to the last one, which we started the show, and this is going to be the raster ablation of a vector logo. And just to show you this small text concept, this is actually going to be etching away the outside of the text, so there's no pulling involved at all, and it's going to create a tagless label for the inside of a shirt that has all the care instructions. So you see it's etching away. It's actually sort of etching the material so much so that you start to see the honeycomb table underneath on the laser, but you also start to see some of the text come to life for application. And this really allows you to customize and create and do all kinds of detail. So to sort of wrap up, this is our 101 of laser cutting. It's brand new for us, and honestly it's exciting because it really powers creativity, and there's a lot you can do with a laser. And I'm excited about what we'll come up with next as we start to use lasers more with our heat transfer films and ultimately bring the concepts and ideas to you as viewers of Stahls TV. So if you have a laser cutter and you answered yes to that question, we'd be happy to follow up if you're interested in trying this out with some material samples and really to get your feedback and help to dial in settings for your particular brand of laser. If you have one that's different than the universal one that we've tested, we'd love to work with you to sort of get your feedback. What are the pain points? What needs fixed? What do we need to work on in order to grow sales in this market of heat transfer film? Because I think a laser cutter owner and the fact that you can now customize apparel and realize the power of heat transfer film is just tremendous for your business. So this has been a Stahls TV presentation, and we want to thank you for attending, and please fill out the survey at the close of the session. Thanks for watching.